Welcome everyone to Almost Cancelled. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about Squid Game Season 1 Episode 7. It's called VIPs. So full spoilers for the episode as always. Much like the last episode, this one is mostly the game. There's a lot more build up I think to this one because we have the VIPs arriving and we have kind of the first part of it, which is, the last game had that as well with picking the partners I suppose, but this one had picking the numbers. So they're kind of like really ramping up the psychology that goes along with the games. This one was a bit more physical, although arguably it was more of a game of chance than it was a physical game. There was jumping and whatnot, but it wasn't for the most part, it wasn't like an athletic challenge. Maybe a little bit of a rush towards the end when the time limit was going out, but other than that, it was more about the psychology of the actual choosing things. So the game's super interesting this episode. This one also takes out a bunch of the characters. A lot of the cast are dealt with this episode. We are down to just 3 of the players at the end, which is exciting and cool because it means things are going to get super personal. And 2 of them are super likable and we're kind of rooting for, I think, as an audience. And one is not so likable, I'll just say. Let's put it a little bit lightly at this point. With Sang-woo, but he really kind of lets his inner asshole out in this episode in a really big way by the end, and towards the start as well. Actually, there's a couple of things at the start that stuck out with him, but yeah. So obviously we got all the VIP stuff to talk about, some of the mythology and lore that's been teased. There's a lot of things going on in this one. This was another super excellent episode. Was it as good as the last one? Maybe not quite as good, because episode 6 is probably the best episode of the show so far, but 7 is not that far behind it. Everything about it was really firing on all cylinders. The game was exciting. The VIPs, like getting to cut to them as they're watching the game, was also super interesting and gave a very different perspective. It was almost like some of the things they were saying were kind of like bastardized versions of what we're thinking as an audience, except they're just in it for the sport of it and the gambling and all that, whereas we actually care about the characters. So there's also kind of this anger that comes with it because we're seeing these assholes enjoy the thrills of them, like, having to choose these life or death like choices constantly. So really interesting stuff throughout. And I have repeatedly praised this show for constantly feeling fresh, and being able to cut to the VIPs is definitely a big factor in this episode that makes it feel fresh. I think the game is different enough anyway that it would have been fine without, but this VIP element of having all these like 1%ers with their golden masks on, I think I actually forgot to mention that we saw one of these masks before when the detective was like snooping around. He saw one mask, and that one mask I assume belongs to the host, who does not join everyone else, because we actually don't have a title for who I've been referring to him as the leader because he has the different mask and he was in charge, but now we know him as the front man. He is the front man to this game. He is not the host, but the host we only see briefly, and he for some reason doesn't want to have anything to do with like meeting the VIPs this time. It seems like he normally does. They're expecting to see him, but he doesn't show up. The front man gives an excuse. It doesn't reveal that there's an intruder, but does know that there is an intruder running around. So there's some interesting stuff with that. He notices his phone's been put down the wrong way, so he knows that he's around. He goes looking for him, and it's only because the VIPs arrived that he doesn't really find the detective, who's kind of hiding in the corner of the records room. But everything with these VIPs is interesting. They're all speaking English. Several of them are American, but there is like at least 1 or 2 European accents in there. They're been waited on hand and foot. There is a new type of employee with these black masks on that are there to serve them. Of course, the detective actually kidnaps one of them and takes his outfit, which puts him into some really interesting positions with one of the rich guys who kind of becomes attracted to him and demands a few things, but ultimately demands sex and a blowjob. And it's all very awkward and uncomfortable. It definitely adds another layer to everything that's going on whilst this is all happening. It's a nice way of accentuating exactly how these people treat the world, and you could probably guess that they have this type of attitude to the world and everything's at their behest because they're filthy rich. But this is like a really specific example. It's not just that they're doing stuff that is morally wrong. Like, put in these positions, they're also just absolutely awful human beings. And obviously, detective, scares him with the gun, grabs his balls. He practically wets himself. This guy, as soon as he's actually in a moment of real danger, and we don't know what information he gets from the VIP about the game, because it cuts away when he says, "Tell me everything you know about the game." So we don't know what information he gets. He tries to leave. The cliffhanger of the episode is him being trailed because he's taking one of the scuba suits, but there's a tracker on it. So the front man and his goons are chasing him in a boat, and that's kind of where we get the cliffhanger of the episode. So that's actually what we end on. All of this stuff though was super interesting though. I think the big thing was cutting to their reactions and having them comment on the sport vibe, and also of course the fact that this mirrors the start of the show when Ji-hoon was betting on horses or whatever I think it was at the time. But just the similar kind of vibe of them all being in this room and sort of doing the same thing. Obviously, there's a lot of differences to it. I mean, arguably, horse racing, as I understand it, is kind of cruel to horses a lot of the time. If you go and research the amount of horse deaths and stuff that happen in horse racing, it's actually really shocking. But so I'm pointing that out because I don't want to make some sort of weird flippant, I don't want to just dismiss what horse racing does to horses, but you've got these rich assholes who are putting humans through this, and then the fact that it's so different in that they have no stakes. It doesn't matter to them if they lose. The guy who tries to sex up the detective, he bets $1 million on number 69 because he thinks it's funny because he's number 69, and then he tries 96. And when that falls through, he's just kind of like, well, I'm going to go and try and have sex. He doesn't care. He goes, whereas in the first episode, as much as Ji-hoon's making a lot of mistakes, he's putting himself into this position, there's a lot of reasons to sort of go against him, but ultimately there are stakes for him in that he does need the money. I mean, maybe if he just didn't gamble in the first place, he wouldn't be in as much trouble, but there are more stakes for him. He's betting with money he really can't afford to lose, whereas these guys are just they can throw away millions and it's nothing to them. You have this excess, you have these people at the top of the food chain, and again, this show has often felt like a commentary on capitalism and the fact that we have the 1%ers just enjoying these people at the bottom of the food chain who are just fighting for scraps because they're that desperate for money that they're willing to put themselves through this. It's not that far away from a bunch of rich guys making homeless people fight for money. It kind of has that vibe to it on a much bigger scale. So all that, and like I say, just the entertainment value added of cutting to their reactions to things and them commenting on people, whenever the players have a tactic and it cuts to the VIPs and they're commenting on the tactic, like, oh, what's he trying to do? Can he tell the difference? Is he doing this? This is getting exciting, interesting, whatever. Or especially early on, actually, because when they're first picking the numbers, right? So they go into the room, the players that are left, and notably the woman's still there, the mother. She's still there. She just got to skip the last round, much to Snake Man's dismay. Before I go into the game, let me just go back and talk about the stuff that happens with the players before that, because there's a couple of sad moments. I intentionally avoided talking about what happens to number 69. 69 is the husband of the couple, and he is distraught about his wife now being dead. To the point where he pleads with the others to, let's just leave. Let's just end this now. This is too much. And it's actually right before this that Sang-woo is telling Ji-hoon that he shouldn't feel too bad about the old man because he's only just a crazy old man that you've only known for a few days. He's basically a stranger. He's been very dismissive of the feelings of Ji-hoon, and he's trying to make him feel better, but he's doing it in a way that's very cold, it's very inhumane. And then right after this, he's the one who gets angry and yells at the husband. It's like, you want to give this up? You want to go? All these people died for that money up there, and you want to just give it up and then possibly start from scratch again? No, he gets really angry with him. No one wants to like leave. No one else wants to go. But he's the one who gets in his face. He's the one who yells at him. It's actually, honestly, I thought the acting from the husband character, I thought he actually did quite a good job in this scene where he was pleading with everyone. I thought he was crying and pleading. It felt very genuine. I think it's a very effective use of essentially a red shirt. Like, him and his wife are, we established they were a married couple when they were picking teams for the tug of war. We saw them as a pair last episode, and in this episode we see him plead like this and then ultimately commit suicide. Like, there's not that much screen time between them, and there's not that much dialogue that either of them had. Like, I think the wife might have had like a line of dialogue in the entire time, if that. And this speech from him is definitely the most he's ever talked. But this was super effective, and the hang itself, when the players wake up and Ji-hoon's looking over, and you'd like to think that Sang-woo, when he sees his body hanging from the bunk beds, that maybe he feels some remorse, maybe he feels some of the humanity coming back to him, but maybe that's a bit too hopeful at this point. And of course, the VIP's reaction to this is him yelling, "Oh, you idiot! What are you doing?" And he's yelling, "Don't do it," but he's not yelling, "Don't do it," because a man's about to kill himself and someone's about to take their life. He's yelling, "Don't do it," because he's bet money on him to win, and he's pissed about it. And it's that divide that the lives and deaths. The life and death, actually, yeah, just singular, that works. The life and death of these, quote unquote poor people is just like, it's not like this, it's not seen as human life to this VIP. And that moment really hits that home in such a way. Obviously it's compounded upon everything else we already talked about with the detective and everything with these characters and everything they say throughout the episode. But that moment, because you don't know what it is at first, you hear him yelling, "Don't do it, you effing idiot." And then the others look at the screen and we realise, oh, it's the husband hanging himself. So this is how you find out. This is how we find out he's about to commit suicide, is this guy's reaction. And that is very powerful. And this episode in general has a really, the tone is a lot darker. Everyone is a lot more upset. Everyone's feeling the impact of everything that's happened up until this point. The quiet scenes of the meeting before the husband starts pleading. All of these moments, you feel the weight of everything. You really do. It feels like everything really has escalated emotionally until this point. And I have praised Korean cinema in general for about probably 2 decades at this point, because I'm getting old. But how good Korean entertainment, and maybe there's a lot of bad Korean stuff that I've just not seen, and it's just the good stuff that I see, and that's why I have this opinion. But the way that they handle tone is it's masterful in a way that I can't. It's weird for me to praise a country like this, because this shouldn't mean anything. It's a country. It's just a group of people in which there's filmmakers. I don't talk about Spanish films versus Italian films versus American films versus British films. No, there's good and bad everywhere, and I'm sure there's a lot of bad in Korea, but there's this thing that seems specific to Korean cinema, as far as I can tell, and it's the way that they can bounce around tones and have the levity, have the comedy, bounce it to something darker, have the lighter moments enhance the darker moments. There is a balancing act of the tones and the way it just shifts between them. And even in an episode like this, which is more dark than it is light, understandably, because that's where we are in the show, it still has moments with Snake Man and the mother. It still has moments with the VIPs that are kind of darkly funny. But then you cut to these moments where everything just feels more tenser than it's ever felt, even though it's done a great job throughout the whole show of having these games feel like it's life and death, feel like they're scary, like they're foreboding, all these things. And somehow it can still bounce around in a way that is super effective. Obviously, there's less levity as we go forward because things are getting more dire, and it makes sense for it to skew more that way. But I think the fact that it's able to handle all that, and I think it's because we have those moments of levity, the darker stuff feels even darker because you've seen these characters feel more real because they've had joking moments or because they've had sweet interactions or whatever it might be. And I you know, like American movies, and I say American because that's, you know, what most of us watch most of the time. For the most part, when they try to bounce around tone and like genre, like a lot of these films do, they just fall apart. They feel like a mess. They feel like everything clashes and nothing works, and you end up with bad comedic scenes and bad dramatic scenes. Nothing works. But something like Squid Game and a lot of good Korean cinema proves that there is a powerful there's a powerful tool and skill in being able to mix them and like get results like you do in something like this. Like, yeah, so I mean that's maybe more of a broad thing to say, but it really hit me as this game was playing out and there was some tense moments. There's a great moment where Ji-hoon is last, right? There's a whole thing where they're picking the numbers and he ends up like he's going to go first because for the first time I think in the show we hear his narration, we hear his inner monologue as he's debating what he should do, and that nicely like complements the VIPs who are also debating what they should do, like how do they pick between 1 and 16 and then in between, you know, and then they give them the hint that it's the order they're going to play. And I have to admit, I was with everyone else. I thought, no, I'll go last, see what the game is first. Yeah, there might be time constraints, but I feel like going first is far more risky. And sure enough, it's just lucky for Ji-hoon that this other guy wanted to be number one because he felt he had something to prove. So that scene was interesting from that perspective. But it's once we actually get to this big, you know, bridge that's made of 2 rows of glass panels, and left or right as they go, one is tempered, one is not. The one that is not will just smash and they'll fall to their death, and the other one will hold their weight. They notably make a point of saying it'll hold the weight of 2 people, and I think that's maybe just a plot device because they have to. There's a couple of moments where there are multiple characters on one panel, so I think they just had to put that in there and say, just in case anyone questions this, like it can hold the weight of 2 people. Not 3, but it can hold the weight of 2. Luckily, none of the players at this point are hefty in size. Good for them. Because that might have really screwed everything up for everyone else if even the tempered glass wasn't going to hold one of these guys. But yeah, so there's a great moment where the games have been playing for a while, but it's when Ji-hoon's going to take his first step, because he's last, right? So he's the last one to go onto the bridge. And he can't remember what the first one was, because the first row, right, the first pair of panels, the first person who went got it right. They just guessed left or right, and they got it right, and they didn't fall. It was the second row of panels that they fell to their death on. And it's actually easier if someone fell to their death, because you can see there's a hole there, or there's a glass panel here, so I'll step on the panel. But for the ones that someone just got right, they have to remember them. And I actually really appreciate this moment, because I also couldn't remember. I couldn't remember if it was left or right for that first panel. And it's a really good little moment, because I think it, like, he's so concerned looking ahead to see what the choice up the front is, that he forgot what the first one was, and that felt very realistic to me. It felt really vulnerable, and I think one of the most happy fist pump moments of this entire show might be the pickpocket, might be Se-book, like turning around and you just hear her voice say, "It's the left," and she's just looking at him, "It's the left," and it's actually genuinely quite a sweet moment, because she's, she had a similar moment with the water for the old man a couple of episodes ago, but this felt even like bigger. This was like she's kind of looking out for him a little bit, and she's not going to like get sappy about it. She's still going to act tough and be like, "It's the left, get it together." She still kind of adds that on, but it doesn't change the fact that she just saved his life potentially. I mean, he could have just guessed it. Obviously, it's 50-50, but I thought that moment was wonderful, and I think it's exceptional that 16 people crossing a bridge of glass panels where they've got a 50-50 chance at the front of falling to their death or not. It's amazing that this lasts for like over 30 minutes, and it is so captivating. And and I'm never going to remember the exact order of the moments, right? It's too difficult to remember that, but there's so many specific moments where I think it's the third guy who, after the first two people have fallen to their death, he tries to do the quick tactic. He tries to just run for it, and just he gets like 3 or 4 panels down before he finally falls to his death. And I think he's wondering, like, either just standing and thinking about it isn't going to help, so I might as well just run for it. But also maybe he's hoping that if I'm quick enough, maybe the ones that smash will like, maybe it'll hold me for just that split second that I need to leap to the next one. Might be his thought process. But I like that there was different ideas. I like that different characters approached it differently. I love the dark irony of the religious guy when he ends up at the front because he's number 6. He stops and prays for a sign from God, and the character behind him gets frustrated and jumps over to his panel and struggles with him, and he ends up falling forward, this other guy, into the panel. So in a weird way, God kind of answered. This guy fell through the next panel and told him which one was the right way. So he felt his prayer was answered, and I thought that was darkly quite funny. Of course, the next panel he starts, taking too much time as well. So this other guy just runs up behind him and pushes him, and hey, look at that, we've got the next one sorted out. And naturally, it turns out there's just enough players that the last couple probably will have a clear path as long as there's enough time. And then, sure enough, our last 3 players are Sang-woo, Pickpocket, and Ji-hoon, in that order. So yeah, but obviously the other big moment is Snake Guy, who, when he gets he's in second place and the guy in front ends up falling to his death, he just turns and says, anyone who wants to go has to go first. Like, I'm not moving until other people have went in front of me. He tries to bully other people into changing order, effectively. And I think there is one guy who was one of his cronies, actually runs up and tries to struggle with him and ends up falling to his death. Although no, it's a wasted death though, because he doesn't like fall through one of the panels. He falls to the side. You could have used him at the very least to check the next row. Which is maybe a dark thought to have, but that's what I was thinking during this moment. But then it's his nemesis. It's the crazy lady. Before I'll be calling her the mother. Let me just get her name for this one time, because she's about to die. Mi Neo. I'm probably butchering that, but she says, "No, she'll go first. Like, there's no point in waiting to die, so I'll go first." And he's like, "Oh, very well then." And I think one of my favorite little details here in the performance from the actress is she steps up to the edge in front of him to make her choice for the panels in front of him. And the way she turns around to look at him before she grabs him, I think is exceptional. Like, I mean, it's exceptional acting, but I think specifically, like, the like, she doesn't like just turn and grab him at the same time. She turns almost robotically and looks at him and then grabs him. And the way she looks at him, because I watched this, I'll put cards on the table, I watched this episode twice, right? I watched this a couple days ago, didn't have time to record it, and when I came to today, I thought, you know what, I'm just going to watch it again. I'm going to refresh my memory on everything, because the show's that good, I don't mind watching it twice. And on the second viewing in particular, I really noticed this little detail in the performance where she turns around. And then she grabs him and says, "I told you I was going to kill you for betraying me." And sure enough, and she's even nice enough, like, credit to her, she's a bit crazy and all that, but she's even nice enough to fall backwards, or backwards for her, but she's falling forwards on the bridge, right? So she's falling backwards towards the front of the bridge, meaning that she goes through a glass panel as she goes down. So she's actually made one of the choices for the other players for them. So she even clears a row for the rest of the players. How nice of her. So all this was great stuff. This was a great big moment. I felt like, the end of her story had to be getting back at him. I wasn't sure both of them were going to die this episode. I thought one of them would survive for another episode, but this was a big way to go out, and I suspect that there won't be a game next episode. I think we'll, unless there's a lot after the final game that I can't predict right now, I would suspect that we'll build up to the final game for the final episode. But I mean, we'll see. at this point, almost no reason to try and predict that. Really, it doesn't really matter. This show has proven that it knows how to pace out its damn story. I don't really need to think about it now. So, but then something like, so without four, right? So there's one guy that we've not really seen before who's at the front, but it turns out he used to work at a glass manufacturer. And he can actually tell which ones are tempered. If he looks at the way the light's hitting the edge of the glass or whatever, he can tell which one's tempered, and he's making the right choice. He makes the right choice like several times in a row, enough that the VIPs are like, oh, this is getting less exciting. He seems to know what he's doing. So the front man turns off the lights, and he's like, well, I can still tell if I've got stuff to throw. And luckily, Ji-hoon has a marble still, so he throws the marble on the one that he thinks is tempered, and he says, well, I need to throw something else in the other one to be sure. But no, I want to point this out. He was actually right. The one he throws it on, that he's checking to see if it's tempered, is the right one, because in a second when Sang-woo throws him through the one right in front of them, that's the one that smashes. And so the guy was right. His hunch was right. He just wanted to confirm it. But this moment's super dark. This is Sang-woo just acting evil and being vicious in the moment. Now, admittedly, they are on a time limit. There's seconds left at this point. They have to make this choice, and it's the last one, right? It's the very last one. So, and I love that even at the end of this bridge, this simple 50-50 choice is just as high stakes, if not more high stakes than the first one was. Like, it didn't diminish because they'd done 20 rows of these glass panels. When they get to that last one, it's still 50-50 that this guy's going to die. So they give it a moment, and but yeah, so Sang-woo kills him, and by this point, because the lights are turned out, it's a really neat touch in the direction, which I don't think is an accident. That the reactions from Ji-hoon and Pickpocket, like, they're in relative darkness. There's a lot more shadow. They're not brightly lit anymore, so it feels even like physically lit darker. It's a dark moment, but it's also literally darker in the scene. So their reactions playing out in this very kind of low lighting situation actually adds to kind of the horror of what he's just done, that he's capable of doing that, and that maybe Ji-hoon and Pickpocket are going to have to be buddies, because he's the one they can't trust. Now, admittedly, I suspect that there can only be one winner, but we'll see how things shake up come final game time, especially if Detective Man's still running around and helping, if he doesn't make it away from the island properly. We'll have to see how that shakes up. But so yeah, there's like 10 seconds left. They just have to run for it. Ji-hoon, of course, just makes it, which wasn't a trope this episode, because there was a whole process to, like, they knew it was going to be the order of playing, and like choosing those numbers was a big part of it. So it didn't feel like a trope this time that he was last by any means. Maybe fate was helping him out a little bit, but that's okay. So we get, honestly, if there's anything I will critique in this episode, is I'm not so sure we needed the ridiculous slow motion at the end of this. So they get to the platform on the other side, and when the time limit runs out, all of the glass panels that are left are all sort of rigged to like explode. So we get this, like, and I didn't mind the slow motion for that, where you see them all sort of go poo 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 poo, along the bridge. That was fine. But we get this ridiculous slow motion as they're like turning away from the glass, and they're getting sort of cuts in their face. And I thought that it was only going to last a couple of seconds and then speed back up and sort of show them just kind of like duck for cover. But instead, like, it goes, like, the camera like pulls back as all three of them are turning very slowly, and I was just kind of like, that's maybe a bit excessive. I don't know if we needed this much slow motion. Again, it's like the most minor of quibble, though. The fact that I'm going through these episodes now and I'm like finding like maybe one like nitpick where I'm like, creatively, I don't know if I'd have made that technical choice, but not a big deal. And throughout all this, the front man is noticing that the VIP and our detective are gone, like they're missing, and he knows where he is because he suspected like how he was getting in and out of the complex through his like secret, ladder shaft. Ladder shaft, is that the right word? He's got a secret ladder. You know what I'm talking about. And they even sort of make eye contact because he's at the bottom of the ladder when he goes to find him. So then we get the cliffhanger ending where he's out in the water and they're searching for him. So, no doubt there's details that I might have glossed over or forgot to mention, but I like, this show is very freaking good, and it's been a long time since I felt this way with a brand new show. And it's been a long time since I felt this way about a Netflix show. So I am pleased that we finally have something that I can say, hey, Netflix don't just make trash now. So that's nice. That's nice. So I'm looking forward to the last 2 episodes, obviously. Super pumped to see where this goes, see how we resolve things, especially since I know there's going to be a season 2. Like, I don't know if there's going to be a cliffhanger per se, but I feel like I don't know. I don't even want to make predictions at this point. Like, we're so deep in the, like, I'm so invested in these characters and their survival that I just, I can't wait to see how it's done. And the filmmaking, the writing, and the performances have all been so exceptional at this point that there's little concern I have. Like, it would have to do something really silly in its finale or something to swerve me at this point where I'm like, no, I don't like this. So we'll see. That's episode 7 of Squid Game. I am looking forward to watching episode 8. So let me know what you thought of this one in the comments. Like, subscribe, ding the bell for notifications. All those things do help out a lot. So please do hit the buttons. You can also get us on patreon.com/MailFuzzTV for as little as $1 per month and help support all the content that way. Keep it all coming and make this sustainable. It's a good word. I should use that more. But yeah, that is me. So thank you once again for watching or listening. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?